all the things we keep inside, all the things that really matter. The face puts on its best disguise, and all is well until the heart betrays.
Well, there was nothing left to do but take the chance. I was running out of food. I had subsisted on the rancid illithids. The Protector's divine magic rendered the creatures safe to eat, but they were barely palatable. I gagged and battled my own sensibilities every time I forced them down. Their foul taste and the bitter, miserable memories they evoked made them nauseating. I had subsisted on them because there was nothing else to eat, but even those sources were about exhausted, and I would need to have something to sustain me on my travels. Therefore, the choice was easy: stay and die, or take a gamble and set off into the unknown wilderness and pray I chose the right direction. I had lived my whole life in Luskan. It was the only place I had known. While there, I had heard tales that the weather got warmer the further south you went, and colder the further north. I supposed, since this was colder than any winter I had known in Luskan, that perhaps it would make sense that Luskan would be towards the south. I couldn't go straight south because of the mountains, but to the southwest looked promising. I gathered up all the supplies I could find, uttered a prayer to the Protector, and set off. The first day of the journey was harder than I had imagined. My muscles had withered away during captivity. My struggles to survive were hard and required a vigorous output of muscles, but I never had enough food to do anything further than to just survive. The ground was covered in thick snow, and even walking was difficult. I was not making much progress. Thankfully, it was not snowing. Yet. As difficult as the days were, the nights were even worse. The only shelter I had was a blanket to cover myself in. The only heat I had was a half-dozen candles I scrounged from the wrecked galleon. Each night I would hunker down, seated against a tree, and throw the blanket over me. I would set a lighted candle down between my knees and try to sleep. It provided just enough heat to keep me alive, but I knew real terror at night. I could hear wolves howling their summons to their brethren, and once heard something much larger crunching the snow as it paced near me. It was close enough that I could hear its nostrils sampling the wind, deciding if I was a meal worth the fight. I stayed concealed and rubbed the crystal, as I had no good alternative. But I learned during this time just how much people needed the Protector watching over them during the night. Each day I walked, I grew hungrier and more tired. Each night I grew colder and more deprived of sleep. I knew this was a battle against time. Eventually, I would just close my eyes from fatigue and then never open them again. Just another victim of winter. I was resolute to no longer be a victim in my life, but the snow seemed to go on endlessly. By the 5th day, my energy was a very dim flame. My hope of surviving my journey was just about exhausted. It was a bitter irony that just as I had learned to really live life, that mine was coming to its end. I was down to my last candle, and it had started to snow. As twilight came to the snowy wilderness, and I stopped for the night. I was too exhausted to even eat. I sat in my blanket, staring at the flame of my last candle. I knew I wouldn't last long. It was strange to think of a human lifespan measured by an insignificantly small candle. It felt like my heartbeat was slowing down. I figured that I should at least recount my tale to the crystal and fulfill my pledge. Maybe if I didn't live, I could at least pass on what I had learned. Maybe it would help someone, someday, if it was ever even found. I told the crystal that night about the life of Mirazumin, a life wasted. I admit it. I cried that night. It was ugly, uncontrollable blubbering. I wept that I had never known my real parents, that I was never important enough for them to keep me. Large, round tears escaped my eyes and streaked down my face. I wept for being such a weak fool, a tool that was used by everyone else, but too impotent to follow my own dreams. I had been a leaf on the wind, blown about by the currents, but never strong enough to grab the tiller and direct my own course. I cried that Obex had gotten one over on me, and would now be living like a king, while I died a frozen pauper. I cried for Braylon, though I hadn't killed him. I had played a part in his untimely death, and I cried most hard about not being able to help anyone. It just seemed so unfair that just as I was ready to help people and make something of myself, that I would be robbed of the chance, that I, Mirazumin, would be an unmarked grave, so insignificant that even one night of snow could totally efface the whole of my existence. The crystal listened impartially to my tale. When I awoke in the morning, I was shocked. I was so certain last night would have been my last night. But it would not be long now. I stood up and shook the snow from my blanket. I tried to start eating, but couldn't even muster the energy. I just sat back down with my back against the tree. I couldn't even lift the blanket back over me. The snow fell on top of me. I fought to keep my eyes open, but it was a losing fight. I had reached the end. Mirazumin closed his eyes for the last time.
So after all these one-night stands, you've ended up with heart in hand, a child alone on your own, retreating, regretful for the things you're not, and all the dreams you haven't got. Without a home, a heart of stone lies bleeding, and for all